Faced with a hostile nuclear-armed neighbor, South Korea's military has announced the creation of a decapitation unit. In the event of a war, the mission of the Special Task Brigade would be to take out the leadership of North Korea. But this is not South Korea's first attempt at creating a team of possible assassins. In 1968, South Korea created a top-secret hit squad called Unit 684. The assassination squad was sent to this uninhabited island called Shilmido for years of training. The initial plan was to recruit death row inmates, but in the end, intelligence officers chose 31 civilians from the streets of South Korean cities.
They were either a shoeshine boy, a newspaper boy, a cinema worker, or a bouncer. They would approach the ones who looked like they might have played some sports and had a strong physique.
In 1970, Yang Dong-soo was a 21-year-old Air Force sergeant sent to Shilmido Island to train Unit 684. The conditions on the island were often brutal.
There were accidents. In the middle of sea survival training, one recruit died of fatigue.
In fact, 5 other recruits were executed for desertion or crimes such as threatening their trainers. For more than 3 years, unit members weren't allowed to communicate at all with the outside world. Finally, something snapped. On the morning of August 23, 1971, Unit 684 staged a bloody mutiny on this beach. They began killing their trainers one by one. When Yang heard gunfire that morning, he initially thought it was a North Korean attack. But then he says one of his trainees shot him through the neck.
When I woke up, I was bleeding from the neck. Everywhere, trainers like me were being killed by the recruits or running away. It was chaos.
Yang says he dragged himself out onto these rocks and hid, and somehow escaped being murdered. After killing 18 of their trainers, Unit 684 wasn't finished. They made it to the mainland and hijacked a bus to the capital, where 20 members died in clashes with Korean security forces. 4 survived to be later executed. For decades, the brutal story of Shilmido Island was covered up. To this day, the survivor often preaches about how God saved him on that terrible day, when the assassins turned on their commanders.
The world has moved closer to the brink of a nuclear conflict. That is the warning that began the 54th Munich Security Conference. NATO's Secretary General said the threat is evolving fast from North Korea to Russia.
We see that Russia is modernizing its nuclear capabilities, developing new nuclear systems, and increasing the role of nuclear weapons in its military strategy.
Stoltenberg said NATO is determined to avoid a new Cold War, welcoming Europe's plans to cooperate more closely on defence.
They are an opportunity to further strengthen the European pillar within NATO and contribute to better burden sharing. But with opportunity comes risk. The risk of weakening the transatlantic bond, the risk of duplicating what NATO is already doing.
The United States has echoed those concerns. Germany's defense minister said such fears were unwarranted.
Wir wollen transatlantisch bleiben.
We want to stay transatlantic in our outlook, but also become more European. A start has been made. Last December, we finally launched plans for a European defense union. In a way, we started out on the political path towards working on a European army.
Politisch aufgemacht, an der Armee der Europäer zu arbeiten.
The United States has repeatedly called for European allies to boost defense spending. US Defense Secretary James Mattis was present in Munich Friday, but will not address the conference. Analysts say Washington is sending allies mixed signals.
We've got Americans ramping up their presence along the eastern flank of NATO. And so at the level of of commitment, real commitment of American capabilities, there seems to be actually a re-engagement. But at the political level, at the level of political leadership, strategic leadership, I think people sense the lack of voice.
The United States National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster is due to speak at the conference Saturday. Delegates here are keen to hear Washington's take on countering the many threats to global security.
Our top story this afternoon, the United States is issuing some of its gravest warnings yet about the threats posed by North Korea. Washington's intel director says Pyongyang poses an ever more increasing threat to the US, and that while the goal is a peaceful settlement, the decision time is becoming ever closer in terms of a response to the regime's nuclear program.
One of the top intelligence officials in the U.S. says time is running out for the United States to confront the existential threat posed by North Korea. Speaking at a Senate intelligence hearing on Tuesday, Director of National Intelligence Stan Coates warned decision time is edging ever nearer for the United States to take action on North Korea's nuclear weapons program. He said the Trump administration's goal is to reach a peaceful settlement through its policy of maximum pressure.
Decision time is becoming ever closer in terms of how we respond to this. Our goal is a peaceful settlement. We are using maximum pressure on North Korea in various ways, which can be described by my colleagues here. Most of that in open session, in closed session. But we have to face the fact that this is an potentially existential problem for the United States.
Coates added that North Korea's repeated statements that its nuclear weapons are the basis for its survival suggest the regime does not intend to give up its nuclear programs through negotiations. He warned North Korea will continue with more aggressive testing, saying it will likely pose the most volatile and confrontational threat this year. The top intel official said the U.S. expects Pyongyang to continue conducting ballistic missile tests and increase its nuclear stockpile, as well as continuing its long-standing chemical and biological warfare programs. Also speaking at the Senate intelligence hearing on Tuesday was CIA Director Mike Pompeo. He said that despite the recent inter-Korean talks, there's no indication of any strategic change in Kim Jong-un's desire to remain a nuclear threat to the United States.
Can we live in a world where Kim Jong-un has the capability to destroy New York or Washington with a push of a button? I mean, is that a world that we're willing to go into?
So that'll be a decision for the president, ultimately. I think he has been unambiguous about his view on that.
Is he deterrable? Is Kim deterrable, or does he want these weapons for another purpose? This is a debate within the people who've watched Korea. Is that, does he want this for regime preservation, or does he want it because it gives him the freedom of action to do things that are destabilizing in the region?
So we've said, the CIA has said this publicly before. It is more than just regime preservation that we are concerned he will use. We talk about the nuclear risk all the time. That gets the brunt of the world's attention, and appropriately so. But his conventional forces alone, right, close to 1 million under arms, depending on how you count them, is no small thing. And so we do believe that Kim Jong-un, given these tool sets, would use them for things besides simply regime protection. And that is to put pressure on what is his ultimate goal, which is reunification of the peninsula under his authority. And so we don't think it's the case that he's simply going to use this tool set for self-preservation. We think he'll use it in a way that is either, you call it what you will, call it coercive is perhaps the best way to think about how Kim Jong-un is prepared to potentially use these weapons.
There seems to be a perception that the options in North Korea are nuclear war or or going to a deterrence strategy, and there are options in between that. I mean, if he's a rational actor, and President Trump decided to do something like a limited strike like the one he had done in Syria, would a rational actor would not respond the way the Syrian regime didn't respond, right? In the sense that they would lead to regime destruction. So if you're a rational actor who wants to preserve your regime, are there options to address his capability militarily that don't involve a nuclear war between the United States and North Korea?
I'm thrilled that you ask. I'm equally happy not to answer.
Good. All right. And by the way, I have to ask, and we all understand when you can't answer.
Let me say this, though. The American people should know we're working to prepare a series of options to make sure that we can deliver a range of things so the president will have the full suite of possibilities. The president is intent on delivering this solution through diplomatic means. It is the focus. It has been uniformly that for now 365 days. It remains so today. We are focused like a laser on achieving that. We are equally at the same time ensuring that if we conclude that is not possible, that we present the president with a range of options that can achieve what is his stated intention.